had a cross-country coach in high school. He was a good coach. Taught me a lot. Not just about cross-country stuff. And there was a time when I got to a certain spot, kind of a plateau. I felt like I wasn't kind of going anywhere. I was stuck. Couldn't improve. And one of the problems is that I would get into races and I would be going along okay, and then I'd start to get a little tired, and the group would sort of leave me. they would. I felt like I was standing still because they would go out ahead of me. And my coach would always say to me, "You've got to maintain contact." And I would say, "Okay, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to maintain contact. I'm trying to stay with the group, but I'm just not there." Maintain contact, he said. Maintain contact. And it just wasn't working for me. I'd try to speed up, but then I'd get more tired. And so finally he said, "Look," he said, "I want you to try something, a little trick." He said, "What I want you to do is next time you feel like you're drifting back, I want you to pick somebody in the pack. Doesn't matter who it is. I want you to pick somebody in the pack, and I want you to do nothing but this." He said, "I want you to look at their feet and just concentrate on their feet." And I said, "Okay, I'll try anything at this point." So I thought, well, I'm going to try this in practice first. And so we were out on a training run, and I was just, doing my thing, and I started to feel a little bit tired, and I just looked at a teammate in front of me. I just picked one, and I just looked at his feet. Never took my eyes off his feet. I wasn't worried about falling or tripping in a hole because I figured he'll trip in a hole before me. And then I can just go around or something. So I wasn't worried about any of that kind of stuff. I just looked at his feet. And a remarkable thing happened. My cadence of my feet started to match his. And not only that, but I actually started to kind of catch up. I felt it was strange. I felt like I was actually being, instead of standing still and the pack, going away from me, it was almost the opposite. Like the pack started to slow down and I started to be able to catch up to them. It was crazy, but it worked. So then I started trying it in races, and it worked. And I got better. I didn't win all the time, but I got better. And my confidence grew. And I felt like by the time I was a senior in college, I felt like I had confidence. I felt like I could actually kind of do this. All from watching their feet. Feet get a bad rap. Because we're always talking about hands, right? Just even in our worship service today, we're always talking about hands, right? Our hands do all sorts of stuff for us. But you know what? We wouldn't get very far without the feet doing the real work. Because it's the feet that carry the hands. There are two very interesting phrases in our lessons today. One is, "Here I am," and the other is, "Follow me." Here I am, follow me. One other quick story. Tomorrow, January 15th, we know, or we should know, is the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, we have a national holiday in his honor and memory. Dr. King gave a speech. It's a relatively famous speech, but it's not the dream speech. That was in Washington. This speech was in Memphis. He was, by that time, not only a national figure, but an international figure. He'd won the Nobel Prize for Peace. Everybody knew who he was. But he kept going because he felt, and in his own words, he felt called to the mission that he was on. He gave a speech not to clergy, not to well-known politicians, not to the rich and famous. He gave a speech to sanitation workers who were striking in Memphis. Because Dr. King understood that the civil rights movement for him was not simply maybe a religious movement or a political movement. It was a movement about people. It was a movement about empowering people to lay hold of their own futures and to lay hold of a community future that looked a whole lot more like God's kingdom than it did at present. He said a couple of interesting things in that speech. One, he recast the Good Samaritan story that so many in the room knew. And you wonder, what does a group of striking sanitation workers want to hear about the Good Samaritan? Well, this is what he said. He said, we often think about that Good Samaritan story. We often think about that story as the people who passed by, or even the person who stopped. We think about the people who passed by and we think, what did they think when they saw that person lying there, bloodied and beaten? And Dr. King in that speech said, they probably thought, if I stop right now, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to be late for church? Am I going to become ritually unclean because I touched a bloody body? What's going to happen to me? And instead he turned it around. And he said the Samaritan thought something different. In fact, the Samaritan thought something that was the opposite. The Samaritan thought, if I don't stop now, what's going to happen to him? It's a very different way. But the Samaritan said, just as Samuel did, Lord, here I am. And this is what I'm called to do and be right now. I'm called to help. I'm called to be God's kingdom for this hurt and broken person right now. Dr. King also went on to talk about how he had flown up from Memphis that morning, or from Atlanta that morning to Memphis, and how the plane was delayed. And the pilot came on the intercom and said, we're sorry for the delay, but on the plane today we have Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we have to delay the plane so we can search the bags in the plane and make sure that nothing is going to happen to him and to all of you. And as he referenced that, he said, I know the rumors. I know that there are things happening in the world and even here in Memphis that are endangering my life. Really what he was saying is, Lord, here I am. Here I am. Not just in a large sense of being an international figure, but here I am in solidarity with these sanitation workers, in solidarity with these people, because that's where you've called me to be, even if it's dangerous. And he finished his speech, and this is where the famous part comes in. He finished his speech by saying, I may not get there with you, but I've seen the mountaintop. I may not get there with you. He encouraged people to follow him, which was, of course, by extension, to follow the Lord. to follow the teachings of Jesus, to follow the teachings that we share here every Sunday. That speech, which has come to be known as the mountaintop speech, was given on April 3rd, 1968 in Memphis. Only hours later, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was killed by a lone assassin. How do we follow that? We think about Dr. King, we think about other famous people, especially people who've been motivated by the gospel. We say, how do I follow that? Well, most of us can't, frankly. It would be great if one of you won the Nobel Prize. I'd come, sit there, cheer you on. But it's more likely than not that you won't. So how do we follow? How do we follow that example that went even unto death to bring forth the kingdom? And I'm not just talking about Dr. King, of course, I'm talking about Jesus himself. How do we follow? It's one thing to say, here I am, and that's a wonderful first step. It's one thing to say, Lord, you've noticed me, here I am. How can I do your will? It's quite another to pick up your own cross and follow. That's where it gets tough. So I have a bit of advice. Pick Jesus. Or if that seems too much, and I know that sometimes that feels like way too much. But pick somebody. Maybe it's Dr. King. Maybe it's Gandhi. Maybe it's somebody who you respect enough to say, wow, I want to follow them. I want to follow. Maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it's a coach. Maybe it's somebody who you think embodies the kingdom on earth. Somebody who you feel like is following in such a way that you say, I want to be like that. Look at their feet. Look at where they go. Because words are good and actions are good. But look at where they go. Dr. King went to places that most speakers wouldn't go. Jesus went to places that most people wouldn't go. But if we want to follow, it's not as hard as we think. Now, we will have to follow Jesus right up to the foot of the cross, but He'll take it for us. He'll ascend that cross for us, but we have to follow right to the foot of it. But again, watch His feet. How beautiful are the feet. Watch His feet. Watch where He goes. Read the Bible. Hear the stories. Watch where His feet go. And I'll tell you, like a runner, your feet will fall into cadence with His. You're not meant to ever catch Him, because it's Jesus after all. But again, whether it's Dr. King or some figure that you respect and honor and believe that they are following Christ, watch their feet. Watch where they go and follow. Now, it's not easy, as I said. It is a risk. It may even lead you into danger. It sure did for Martin and so many others who followed him. But you can do it. Wouldn't it be remarkable? They called it the civil rights movement. Still do. Wouldn't it be remarkable if by following Jesus, we could rekindle that movement? We could move Christians from beyond denominations and beyond memberships and beyond regional, connections back to where it started as a movement. Wouldn't it be something? But if you're going to have a movement, you got to have feet. Amen.